What's up, my friends? I'm here to talk to you today about a very important posture, and that is Dandasana. This, the staff pose. And in reality, sitting in this L shape is very challenging for most of us, very taxing, because we sit in chairs. We could become atrophied in specific muscles, long tight in certain muscles. And it's really hard for us to get into this position naturally without stealing from other places and ending up sitting like this, because in reality this should come from our hips, which that tailbone should be untucked. We should have that nice S concave curve in our lower back, that convex curve in our upper back, concave in the cervical spine. Again, it's a lot of work to get here, and it can be years of practice. So if you're like, I don't get it today, that's okay. I recommend taking time before you do this to do hand to big toe on each leg, 3 to 5 minutes, or 3 to 5 release breaths, as well as Setu Bandha, which is bridge pose. And we'll do that together in a second here, just for 3 breaths, maybe longer. I'll let my dog out here. Come on. Here we go. And let's start in that Setu Bandha. Before we begin, go get a block or something like this. A tissue box is also nice, because we're going to use that to work on our pelvic tilt. So thing number 1, we need to understand pelvic tilt. We need to be able to contract through our glutes and isolate our glutes, our hamstrings, and our hips so we can get into that posture. So we're going to lay down flat on your back, soles of your feet planted. We're going to take that block or tissue box and put it in between your thighs. Those feet are going to be set up just about hip width, and pulling those heels in towards your butt without using your hands. Round to the inner edges of the feet. Squeeze that block again. And wiggle that rib cage up and away from those hips. And those arms down by your sides, palms facing up. From here, rib cage zipped in. If we resist the heels towards your butt, we can untuck those hips and move my arms out of the way so you can see that really arches through my lower back. As we do this, we're going to try and keep that rib cage pressed down so that we don't overarch like this. And then if we do the opposite, if we resist the heels down away from our body, those hips will tuck. It's like we're flattening our lower back into the mat without lifting your butt up. This is where most of us are sitting because chairs, modern lifestyles, cars, all of the fun things that we do. If we reverse that, we're resisting the heels towards the butt. It's almost like it's pulling our body down towards the hips. That tailbone untucks. That lower back starts to lift a tiny bit, and that rib cage is still zipped in. This is where we want to be. This is an anterior pelvic tilt. If you want to do the opposite again, curling those hips under, flattening that back. It's a posterior pelvic tilt. We want to be out of that in our daily posture. So let's come back to anterior, resisting those heels towards the butt, rib cage zipped in. Now, let's activate into your glutes, pressing your arms down into the mat, palms facing up. So hard you feel that spine starting to lift. It's like you're going to pull your shoulders underneath your body. Try to squeeze your butt here, your butt muscles, if you can find them as you resist into those blocks. Then lift those hips up just an inch. Take a few breaths here. And maybe you can lift those hips higher while continuing to use that butt. You start to feel your hamstrings. That's normal. We don't want the hamstrings being the primary driver here. So if you feel that, lower down a little bit. If you feel it, it's also okay. After those 3 breaths, we'll set right back down. We're going to take that block out. Imagine that block's there, so we're trying to get that same tension. Untucking those hips, rib cage zipped. Pressing the arms down, pressing down to the inner edges of the feet. Squeeze that butt to lift those hips up. Imagine you're still squeezing that block between the thighs and breaking the knee belt, pressing out at the same time. There's my glutes, 3 breaths. Chest is open. Maybe we can go higher, keeping those glutes active. And then we'll set right back down. So we want to know that pelvic tilt and the musculature necessary to generate that, and we want to have that back contraction to be able to get into our Dandasana. So now let's sit up towards that letter L. The contraction here is very similar. These legs are out long out in front of you. You're going to reach back, untuck your butt cheeks so that tailbone's released back. We're manually finding that anterior pelvic tilt. We'll ground through the heels, toes lifted here. I want you to be able to see my check points, my knees. You can see my knees are bent, so I have that gap underneath my hamstrings. Again, while we're in this position, imagine that block's between the legs. Actually, you know what? Don't imagine. Take that block, that Kleenex box, place it between the thighs above the knees, and squeeze it. gonna give us that containment again. If your hips moved, manually adjust them. Toes lifted, pointing towards the sky, knees, same thing. And notice my left foot is ungrounded, so I'm gonna ground to the inner edge of that foot, flattening like it were on the ground. Resisting the heels towards the hips, that helps me untuck here. I'm just gonna plant my hands down in the mat next to my hips, now behind me, and press the floor away. Sitting nice and tall. It's like I'm lifting myself up, trying to almost pull my butt back into the L a little bit more. Holy hips to maintain this as I try to keep that tailbone untucked. Grounding from pointer finger ball mount to pinky. Shoulders squeezed back to open that chest. It's like I'm hugging my elbows into my rib cage. And then breaking the elbow belt, resisting them away from the body, creating a space underneath our underarms. 3 breaths. Hold the bubble in your mouth. And then as we exhale, we can relax. You probably felt a lot of hip flexor work there, and that's okay. So now we're gonna work on that same thing, except we're gonna take this block that I just dropped or tissue box, and we're gonna set it behind your hips. You're gonna butt it up to your sacrum. It's a little diamond between your right and left hip bone. We're gonna take our butt, manually find that anterior pelvic tilt, that tailbone untuck again. Rebutt that thing up, and we'll set up the legs the same way. Knees bent, heels grounded. Stretching that mat apart between the heels. Toes lifted, toes grounded. Imagining we're squeezing that block in between the legs again. And at the same time, breaking that knee belt. So it's like you can even put your hands on the outside of your knees and press out. You're gonna feel those hips doing a ton of work to stabilize here. Now we'll bring those hands down next to your hips. Make sure this is butted up against that sacrum. Press down into the mat with those palms, and imagine we can pull your hips away from that block. If your hips start to push into it, that tissue box, I'm gonna move my hands so you can see, then we're coming to posterior tilt, we're starting to slouch. If we pull away from that, that's work. Holy hip flexors. We are getting into that anterior pelvic tilt using your hips, restoring neutral posture in that lower back, press into the floor with those hands, hug the triceps towards the rib cage, chest is open. Rib cage zipped, stretch the elbow belt, looking straight ahead. Hold the bubble in your mouth. 3, 4, 5 breaths. Pressing the floor away. Release. Shaking it out. We're gonna do it one more time. And this time we'll set up and we're gonna try and keep this untucked as we straighten into those legs. So let's set up again. Toes lifted, heels grounded. Flatten through the inner edges of those feet. Squeeze the imaginary block between your legs and break the knee belt. Resisting the heels towards your hips. Butt that tissue box or block up against the sacrum here. Plant your hands. And just using the resistance of the heels and the hips, tilt away from that box. Holy hip flexors. Press down into the mat. It's like we're lifting that rib cage up away from the hips. Almost like we're lifting our hips up off the floor. Hug the triceps towards the rib cage. Break the elbow belt. Big inhales and exhales. Hold the bubble in the mouth, and maybe we can straighten into those legs, driving the hamstrings down towards the mat without rounding and pushing into that tissue box. Keep yourself pulled up. This is so much work. Maybe you can use the muscles in the hips to tilt you forward a little bit more into that L. Sit that belly in. And release. Woo. Dandasana is business. It is a lot of work. When you are seated anywhere, that is the posture that's going to get you to neutral in your spine, help your hips feel freaking amazing, and really help you feel space as you go to walk around in real life. You're gonna be able to stand up because of that strength and neutrality in your hips, rather than stealing that from your lower back, which, thank you modern lifestyle, we are here to fix. That is it. Enjoy that. Practice it every day, 3 to 5 breaths, 2 to 3 times a day, 2 weeks, and then do it every time that you're sitting, even when you're sitting in a chair. Find that posture up. Imagine you can pull that sacrum away from that seat without arching through that chest, so zipping in, getting tall, using those hips, and enjoy it. Drop it in the comments, let me know how this went for you, and you have an awesome day. Bye.